I lost everything in a tornado that ripped through Kansas City on a Tuesday afternoon. My restaurant, my savings, my home, all gone in 90 seconds of screaming wind. 3 weeks later, I was living on the streets with $10 in my pocket when I found a lost little girl crying in the rain. I gave her my last money for food and shelter. 4 days later, 22 black SUVs pulled up to the homeless shelter where we were staying, and a man stepped out who would change my life forever. I am happy to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment from which city you are watching me so I can see how far my story has traveled. I never imagined that at 47 years old, I would be sleeping under a bridge. But there I was, on a cold September night, huddled against concrete pillars while rain pounded the streets above me. My name is Marcus Webb, and 6 months ago, I owned The Harvest Table, a farm-to-table restaurant in downtown Kansas City that I had built from nothing over 15 years. 6 months ago, I had a beautiful loft apartment, a reliable truck, and $47,000 in savings earmarked for finally opening a second location. 6 months ago, I had a future. Then came May 17th, a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always slow, so I had given most of my staff the day off. I was in the kitchen prepping for dinner service when the sirens started. At first, I wasn't worried. We got tornado warnings all the time in Kansas City. Usually they amounted to nothing. But Sarah, my head waitress and the closest thing I had to family, came running into the kitchen with her phone. "Marcus, this one's real. EF4 heading straight downtown. We need to get to the basement now." We made it to the basement with maybe 90 seconds to spare. Sarah, myself, and two line cooks, Tommy and Luis. We huddled in the corner while the world exploded above us. The sound was like a freight train mixed with a jet engine, mixed with the end of the world. It lasted maybe a minute and a half, but it felt like hours. When the silence finally came, it was somehow worse than the noise. We climbed the stairs to find that my restaurant no longer existed. Not damaged, gone. The entire front wall had been ripped away. The kitchen where I had spent countless hours perfecting recipes was exposed to the sky, equipment twisted like paper clips. The dining room where I had watched couples get engaged, where I had served anniversary dinners and birthday celebrations, was just a pile of brick and splintered wood. "Oh God, Marcus," Sarah whispered, grabbing my arm. "Your apartment." My loft was 3 blocks away, or had been. We walked through streets that looked like a war zone. Cars flipped upside down, trees stripped bare and lying across the road, buildings that had stood for 100 years reduced to rubble. When we reached my block, I felt my knees go weak. The entire building had collapsed. If I had been home that afternoon instead of at the restaurant, I would be dead. Everything I owned was buried under tons of concrete and steel. My clothes, my photos, my mother's recipe books that I had used to build my menu, the savings bonds my father had left me. Gone. "At least you're alive," Sarah said. And she was right. I was alive. But as I stood there looking at the ruins of my life, I wasn't sure that was enough. The next weeks were a blur of insurance meetings and crushing disappointments. My restaurant insurance covered the building, but the payout went to my landlord, not me. My equipment insurance had lapsed 3 months earlier when I was saving every penny for the expansion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Webb," the insurance agent said, not meeting my eyes. "Without current coverage, there's nothing we can do." My apartment building's insurance would eventually pay out, but it could take months or even years of legal battles. In the meantime, I had nothing. I crashed on Sarah's couch for 2 weeks, but she was struggling too. She had lost her job when the restaurant was destroyed, and her landlord was threatening eviction if she couldn't make rent. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she said, tears in her eyes. I just can't afford to help anymore." "I know," I told her, hugging her tight. "You've done more than enough. I'll figure something out." But I didn't figure anything out. I spent my dwindling savings on cheap motel rooms, $45 a night, that evaporated my money faster than I could believe. I applied for every kitchen job in the city, but the tornado had destroyed dozens of restaurants. Hundreds of experienced cooks were competing for the few positions available. I called my brother David in Atlanta. We hadn't spoken much since our father's funeral 5 years ago, but I was desperate. "Marcus, man, I wish I could help," he said, and I could hear the TV in the background. "But Lisa and I just bought this new house, and with the kids' private school tuition, we're stretched pretty thin. Maybe in a few months?" "Sure," I said. "A few months." I never called him again. By late August, I was down to $340. I was staying in a shelter on the east side, a large room with 50 cots where men snored and coughed through the night. During the day, I walked the streets looking for work, any work. I washed dishes at a diner for 2 weeks until they realized they couldn't afford to keep me. I did day labor, loading trucks for $60 a day when I could get it. The other men at the shelter taught me the rules of life on the streets, where the free meal services were, which cops would harass you and which ones would leave you alone, how to protect your shoes, because good shoes were the difference between surviving and giving up. "The key," said a man named Raymond, who had been homeless for 3 years, "is to never lose hope. The moment you lose hope, you're done." I tried to hold on to hope. I really did, but it was slipping through my fingers like water. By early September, I was down to my last $10. $10 between me and absolute zero. The shelter had a 3-week maximum stay policy, and my time was up. "I'm sorry, Marcus," said Tom, the shelter coordinator, a kind man in his 60s who genuinely cared. "We have to make room for new arrivals. You understand." I understood. I packed my few belongings into a backpack, a change of clothes, a thin blanket, a water bottle, and walked out into a world that had no place for me. I found a spot under the Broadway Bridge where a few other homeless men had set up camp. It wasn't much, just cardboard boxes and tarps, but it was something. The men there were kind enough, sharing what little they had. A man named Jesse gave me half his sandwich from a church lunch. "We look out for each other down here," he said. "That's all we got." That night, as I lay on the cold concrete with my thin blanket pulled up to my chin, I thought about my father. He had been a chef too, at a hotel restaurant in St. Louis. He had taught me everything: how to properly dice an onion, how to build layers of flavor, how to treat your kitchen staff with respect. "Marcus," he used to say, "cooking isn't just about food. It's about making people feel cared for. You do that, and you'll never go hungry." But I was hungry now. Not starving, not yet, but the constant gnawing emptiness was becoming familiar. I had lost 30 pounds since the tornado. My clothes hung loose on my frame. When I caught my reflection in store windows, I barely recognized myself. My hair was long and unkempt. My face was gaunt. My eyes had a hollow look that scared me. On September 12th, a Wednesday, the weather forecast started warning about a major storm system moving in from the west. Severe thunderstorms, possible flash flooding, dangerous winds. I watched the dark clouds gathering on the horizon and felt a deep dread. I had survived one storm that destroyed my life. Now another one was coming. By Thursday afternoon, the rain started. Light at first, then steadily heavier. Those of us under the bridge tried to secure our meager shelters, but we all knew it was futile. When the real storm hit, we would be exposed. The community center on 5th Street opens for emergency shelter during severe weather, Jesse told me, shouting over the increasing wind. "We should head there before it gets worse." But I couldn't move. I sat there under the bridge, watching the rain pour down, and felt a crushing wave of despair wash over me. What was the point? I had worked hard my entire life. I had built something beautiful from nothing. I had treated people well, paid my employees above minimum wage, donated meals to food banks. And for what? To end up here, under a bridge, with nothing. "You're coming or not?" Jesse asked, his hand on my shoulder. "I don't know," I said honestly. I don't know anymore, Jesse." He knelt down beside me, his weathered face serious. Marcus, listen to me. I've been where you are. I've been in that dark place where everything seems pointless. But you can't give up. You hear me? You can't give up. Something in his voice cut through my despair. I nodded and grabbed my backpack. We walked through increasingly heavy rain toward the community center, but when we arrived, there was a line of at least 50 people waiting to get in. "We're at capacity," a volunteer shouted from the door. "Try the church on Madison Street." Jesse and I ran through the storm to Madison Street, but that shelter was full too. We tried 3 more locations, each one packed beyond capacity. The storm was intensifying now, wind whipping the rain sideways, thunder cracking so loud it hurt. "We need to find cover," I yelled to Jesse, but he was already moving toward an abandoned warehouse he knew about. We made it inside just as the worst of the storm hit. Water poured through holes in the roof, wind howled through broken windows, but at least we weren't directly exposed. There were maybe a dozen other people taking shelter there, all of us huddled in the driest corner we could find. I sat against a wall, shivering violently. My clothes were soaked through. The thin blanket I had was useless. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to conserve body heat. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. Not with a bang, but with pneumonia in an abandoned warehouse. Hours passed. The storm raged on. I drifted in and out of a state that was half sleep, half unconsciousness. At some point, I realized the rain had lessened slightly. It was maybe 9 or 10 p.m., though I had no way to know for sure. My phone had died weeks ago, another casualty of my new life. I stood up on shaky legs. "Where are you going?" Jesse asked. "I need to move," I said. "Need to stay warm." I walked to the door of the warehouse and looked out at the storm-ravaged streets. The rain was still heavy, but not the torrential downpour it had been. Streetlights flickered, debris was scattered everywhere. And that's when I heard it. A sound that cut through the storm. A child crying. At first I thought I was imagining it. Exhaustion and hunger can make you hear things that aren't there. But no, there it was again. A small voice, terrified and desperate. "Hello?" I called out, stepping into the rain. "Is someone there?" The crying got louder. I followed the sound down the street, past an overflowing dumpster, behind a row of shopping carts that someone had pushed together, and there, curled up in a doorway, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She was soaking wet, her clothes plastered to her small frame. She was shaking so violently I could see it from several feet away. Her lips had a blue tinge that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Hey, it's okay," I said softly, approaching slowly so I wouldn't scare her. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Marcus. What's your name?" She looked up at me with eyes full of terror and tears. "Emma?" she whispered through chattering teeth. "I'm Emma Richardson. I can't find my mom. I can't find anyone." "Okay, Emma, it's going to be okay. How long have you been out here?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "We were at the mall and then everyone was running because of the storm and I got separated and I've been trying to find my way home, but everything looks different and I'm so cold and scared." I knelt down in front of her, my heart breaking at the sight of this terrified child. Her clothes had once been expensive, I could tell. A pink jacket with a designer logo, jeans that probably cost more than I currently had to my name, white sneakers that were now caked in mud. This was a child from a very different world than the one I was living in. "Emma, I'm going to help you, okay? But first, we need to get you warm and dry. Can you walk?" She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. I caught her and realized with growing alarm just how serious this was. Her body temperature had dropped dangerously low. If I didn't get her warm soon, she could go into hypothermia. I picked her up, surprised by how light she was, and carried her back toward the warehouse. But as I got closer, I realized I couldn't take her there. It wasn't safe, not really. There were good people there like Jesse, but there were also desperate people, and I couldn't risk this child's safety. I needed to find real shelter, somewhere with heat, somewhere dry. The problem was, I only had $10 to my name. I stood there in the pouring rain, this shivering child in my arms, and did the calculation in my head. There was a 24-hour convenience store 3 blocks away. They would have food, maybe blankets or towels. Maybe the clerk would let us wait out the storm inside where it was warm. $10 wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. "Hold on tight, Emma," I told her, adjusting my grip. "We're going to get you warm." I walked through the storm, my body aching with cold and exhaustion, but focused entirely on the small girl in my arms. She buried her face against my chest, her tears soaking into my already wet shirt. "I want my mom." "I know, sweetheart, I know. We're going to find your mom. I promise." It was a promise I had no idea if I could keep, but I said it anyway, because this child needed hope, and hope was the one thing I could still give for free. The convenience store was a beacon of fluorescent light in the darkness. When I pushed through the door, the clerk, a young guy maybe 25 with kind eyes, looked up in shock. "Sir, is she okay?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "She's cold and scared. She got separated from her family during the storm. I found her outside. Do you have any blankets, towels, anything warm?" The clerk, his name tag said Darius, came around the counter immediately. "We've got some emergency supplies in the back. Let me grab them. Here, sit her down by the heater." There was a small heater running behind the counter. Darius pulled up a chair and I set Emma down next to the warm air. She immediately curled toward the heat source, her whole body still trembling. Darius returned with a silver emergency blanket, the kind marathon runners use, and wrapped it around Emma. "I'm calling 911, he said. "They need to know there's a lost child." "Good," I said. "That's good. But while we wait, she needs food. Something warm if you have it." I pulled out my wallet and extracted the last $10 bill I owned. It was wrinkled and soft from being handled so many times. I looked at it for a long moment, knowing that once I spent this money, I would have absolutely nothing. No buffer, no safety net. Nothing. Emma looked up at me with those big, scared eyes, and the decision made itself. "What have you got that's hot?" I asked Darius. "I can heat up some soup in the microwave. We've got chicken noodle and tomato." "Chicken noodle. And do you have hot chocolate?" "Yeah, the instant kind." "I'll take 2 hot chocolates and 2 soups." Darius rang it up. "That'll be $8.50. I handed him the $10. He gave me back $1.50 in change. I stared at the coins in my palm. This was now my entire net worth, $1.50. "You want your soup too?" Darius asked. I looked at Emma, still shivering despite the blanket and heater. "No," I said. "Both for her. She needs it more." While we waited for the soup to heat up, I tried to get more information from Emma. "Do you know your mom's phone number?" She shook her head. "It's in my phone, but I lost it when I was running." "What about your address?" It's 1247 something. I can't remember the street name, but it's a big house with a black gilt and lots of trees." Darius brought over the soup and hot chocolate. Emma wrapped her small hands around the cup of hot chocolate and took a sip. Some color started to return to her cheeks. "What does your mom do for work?" I asked, thinking that might help identify her family. Emma looked at me with an expression that was almost confused by the question. "My daddy owns Richardson Industries. Mommy used to run a charity foundation, but she died last year." My heart stopped. Richardson Industries. That was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. I had read about them in business magazines back when I used to have time to read magazines, back when I was a person with a future. Alexander Richardson, the founder and CEO, was worth billions. His wife had died in a car accident, I remembered now. It had been all over the news. And this little girl, shivering in my arms, was his daughter. "Your daddy is going to be very worried about you," I said softly. "We're going to get you back to him, I promise." The 911 dispatcher told Darius it would be at least 45 minutes before anyone could get to us. The storm had created dozens of emergencies across the city, and they were overwhelmed. "Just keep her warm and safe," the dispatcher said. "We'll send someone as soon as we can." 45 minutes. I could do that. Emma ate her soup slowly, each spoonful seeming to restore a bit of her strength. "Are you a daddy?" she asked me between bites. The question pierced me. "No," I said. "I never had kids." "Why not?" I smiled sadly. "I guess I was always too busy with work. I had a restaurant. I spent all my time there." "What kind of restaurant?" "It was called the Harvest Table. We made food with fresh ingredients from local farms. It was really special." "What happened to it?" Emma asked, with a child's innocent directness. "A tornado destroyed it, along with everything else I owned." She looked at me seriously, processing this information. "Is that why you're all wet and cold too? Because you don't have a home?" "Yeah," I admitted. "That's why." Emma set down her soup and looked at me with an expression far too mature for a 7-year-old. "But you helped me anyway, even though you don't have anything." "Of course I did. You needed help." "My daddy says most people only help when they want something back. He says that's how you know who your real friends are, the ones who help when they can't get anything from it." Smart kid, and a sad lesson for someone so young to have already learned. She finished her soup and both hot chocolates, and I could see her eyelids getting heavy. The warmth and food were making her drowsy. "Can I sleep for a little bit?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be right there. You're safe now." She curled up in the chair, wrapped in the emergency blanket, and within minutes she was asleep. I sat on the floor beside her, keeping watch. Darius had gone back to his position behind the counter, but every few minutes he would glance over to make sure we were okay. "That was a good thing you did, spending your last money on her." I shrugged. Wasn't really a choice. She needed it. Still, most people wouldn't have. Most people would have walked right past her. Maybe he was right. Maybe the old me, the me from 6 months ago who owned a successful restaurant and had money in the bank, would have called 911 and considered his duty done. But losing everything had changed me. When you have nothing, you understand in a visceral way what it means to need help. You understand that sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the difference between surviving and giving up. The 45 minutes came and went. An hour passed, then 2. The storm had finally broken, but the 911 dispatcher called back to say they were still dealing with critical emergencies. "A missing child is a priority," Darius argued into the phone. "But she's safe and warm now, so we're going to have to ask you to wait a bit longer." I didn't mind waiting. Where else did I have to be? At least here it was warm and dry. At least here I had a purpose, keeping this child safe until her family could be found. Around midnight, Emma awoke crying. "Bad dream," she whimpered. "I dreamed that my daddy couldn't find me and I was lost forever." Hey, it's okay," I said, pulling the chair closer. "Your daddy is looking for you right now. I guarantee it. And soon, very soon, you're going to be back home with him." "Will you tell me a story?" she asked. "My mommy used to tell me stories when I had bad dreams." I wasn't much of a storyteller, but I tried. I told her about the restaurant, about the regular customers who became like family, about the time we catered a wedding and the groom accidentally dropped the cake, but everyone laughed instead of getting upset. I told her about my father teaching me to cook, about the magic of taking simple ingredients and transforming them into something that made people happy. "That sounds nice," Emma said sleepily. "When I'm big, I want to do something that makes people happy too." "You will," I told her. "I can already tell you're going to do amazing things." She smiled and drifted back to sleep. I sat there watching her, this innocent child who had been terrified and alone just a few hours ago, now peaceful and safe. I thought about all the events that had to happen exactly right for me to be in that specific place at that specific time to hear her crying. If I had stayed in the warehouse, if I had given up an hour earlier, if I had chosen a different shelter to try, this child might have died from exposure. Maybe my life wasn't as pointless as I had thought. Maybe there was a reason I had survived the tornado. Maybe it was for this exact moment. At 2:30 a.m., the door burst open and 3 police officers rushed in, followed by a man in an expensive suit despite the late hour. He was maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair and a face etched with panic and exhaustion. The moment he saw Emma sleeping in the chair, his face crumpled. "Emma," he choked out, rushing toward her. "Oh, God, Emma." She woke up immediately. "Daddy," she screamed, launching herself from the chair into his arms. He caught her and held her so tight I thought he might crush her. He was crying openly, his whole body shaking with relief and joy. "I thought I lost you," he kept repeating. "I thought I lost you too, baby. I thought I lost you too." The police officers were asking questions, taking notes, but Alexander Richardson wasn't paying attention to any of them. He was entirely focused on his daughter, checking her over, touching her face, her hair, reassuring himself that she was real and safe. "I'm okay, Daddy," Emma said. "Marcus saved me. He found me when I was so cold and scared, and he bought me food and kept me warm all night." That's when Alexander Richardson finally looked at me, really looked at me. I knew what he saw. A homeless man with too long hair and clothes that hadn't been properly washed in weeks. A man who looked like he'd been beaten down by life. A man who, by all appearances, had nothing to offer anyone. "You found my daughter?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sir," I said. "She was alone in the storm. I couldn't just leave her there." He stood up, still holding Emma, and extended his hand to me. I hesitated, aware of how dirty I was, but he grabbed my hand and shook it firmly. "Thank you," he said, and his voice broke. "Thank you for saving the most important person in my world." "Anyone would have done the same," I said. "No," he said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Officer Morrison here has been coordinating the search. He told me they found 3 other homeless individuals in the last 2 hours who had seen Emma but didn't stop to help. You did." One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Webb, we're going to need a statement from you. Can you walk us through exactly what happened?" I recounted the entire evening, from hearing her cry to bringing her to the store. Alexander Richardson listened to every word, his eyes never leaving my face. When I got to the part about spending my last $10, I saw something shift in his expression. "Your last $10, he repeated quietly. "Yes, sir." "And you gave it to help my daughter, a stranger's child?" "She needed help more than I needed the money," I said simply. Emma, still in her father's arms, spoke up. "Daddy, Marcus doesn't have a home. A tornado destroyed his restaurant and his house. He's been living outside, but he still helped me." Alexander Richardson's expression changed completely. The gratitude was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of something deeper. "A restaurant?" he asked. "What kind of restaurant?" "Farm to Table, the Harvest Table. It was in downtown Kansas City until the tornado in May." His eyes widened. "I know that restaurant. I mean, I knew of it. My company had our executive dinner there 2 years ago. The food was extraordinary." "You're that Marcus Webb?" I was stunned that he remembered. "Yes, sir. That was my place." "I remember you," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You came out of the kitchen to meet everyone. You explained every dish, where the ingredients came from, the story behind each recipe. My VP of operations said it was the best meal he'd ever had." The memory felt like it belonged to a different lifetime, a different person. "That means a lot," I said quietly. "The tornado took it all." "And no one helped you?" he asked, anger creeping into his voice. "No insurance? No family? No government assistance?" Insurance had lapsed. I was saving money to expand. Family is complicated, and government assistance, well, I'm sure you know how hard it is to navigate those systems when you're in crisis. He nodded slowly, and I could see his mind working. "Officer Morrison, are we done here? Can I take my daughter home?" "We have what we need for now. We may have follow-up questions, but yes, you can take Emma home." Alexander Richardson looked at me intently. "Mr. Webb, I would like you to come with us." "Sir, I don't think—" "Please, it's the middle of the night. The shelter is closed. You have nowhere to go. And I owe you everything. At least let me provide you with a warm bed and a hot meal. We can talk more in the morning." I looked at Darius, who gave me an encouraging nod. "You should go, man. Get some rest." "Okay," I said to Alexander Richardson. "Thank you." We walked outside to find not just a car, but a convoy. 3 black SUVs with drivers standing at attention. Emma had not been exaggerating when she said her father was important. A man in a dark suit opened the door of the middle vehicle and Alexander guided Emma inside. He gestured for me to follow. The interior of the SUV was more luxurious than any place I had been in months. Leather seats, climate control, screens built into the headrests. Emma sat between her father and me, still holding his hand tightly. "Where were you when she got separated?" I asked, as we drove through the empty streets. Alexander's jaw tightened. "We were at the plaza. Emma wanted to go to the bookstore. Her bodyguard was with us, but when the storm warnings went out, everyone panicked. There was a stampede toward the exits. Emma got swept up in the crowd. Marcus, he's trained for this exact scenario, but in the chaos, he lost sight of her. He's been blaming himself all night." "It wasn't his fault," Emma said. "Everyone was pushing and I got scared and ran the wrong way." "I know, baby," Alexander said, kissing the top of her head. "I know." The drive took us out of downtown, through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer, until we reached an area I had only seen in magazines. Massive estates with gates and long driveways. The SUV turned into one of these driveways, and I saw the house Emma had tried to describe. It wasn't just big, it was enormous. 3 stories of modern architecture, with floor-to-ceiling windows and grounds that seemed to stretch forever. "This is your home?" I asked Emma. "Yeah," she said casually, as if everyone lived in a house that probably had 20,000 square feet. "It's too big sometimes. I get lonely." We pulled up to the front entrance, where a full staff was waiting. A woman who looked to be in her 60s rushed forward the moment the car stopped. "Miss Emma," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, thank God, thank God." "I'm okay, Mrs. Chen," Emma said, hugging the woman. "This is Marcus. He saved me." Mrs. Chen turned to me with such gratitude in her eyes that I felt embarrassed. "Bless you," she said. "Bless you for bringing our girl home." Alexander ushered us inside. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. Marble floors, a grand staircase, art on the walls that was probably worth more than my restaurant had been. "Mrs. Chen, could you draw Emma a warm bath and get her into bed?" Alexander asked. "Of course, Mr. Richardson. Come along, dear." Emma hugged her father once more, then surprised me by hugging me too. "Thank you, Marcus. You're my hero." After she disappeared upstairs with Mrs. Chen, Alexander turned to me. "I'm going to have our guest suite prepared for you. But first, you must be starving. When was the last time you had a proper meal?" I tried to remember. Tuesday, I think. The church on 8th Street had a lunch service. That was 3 days ago. His expression darkened. "Come with me." He led me to a kitchen that was bigger than my entire former apartment. Professional-grade appliances, a massive island, and a refrigerator that could probably feed a small army. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a stool at the island. "Let me make you something." "Mr. Richardson, you don't have to. Please," he said, "call me Alex. And yes, I do have to. You saved my daughter. You spent your last money to keep her safe. The very least I can do is feed you." I watched as this billionaire, still in his expensive suit, started pulling food from the refrigerator. Eggs, cheese, vegetables, bread. I'm not much of a cook, he admitted. That was always my wife's domain, but I can manage a decent omelet. As he cooked, we talked. I told him the full story of the tornado, the insurance failures, the slow descent from restaurant owner to homeless. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with each detail. And your family? Your friends? No one could help? My brother said he was stretched thin. My employees were struggling themselves. Sarah, my head waitress, she helped as long as she could, but everyone has their limits. Sarah, he repeated, something in his tone suggesting he was filing away the name. She sounds like a good person. The best, I agreed. He plated the omelet and set it in front of me along with toast, fresh fruit, and a glass of orange juice. The smell alone almost made me cry. Eat, he said gently. Take your time. I did. Every bite was heaven. The eggs were fluffy and perfectly seasoned. The cheese was some kind of expensive import that melted perfectly. Even the bread was artisanal, probably from some exclusive bakery. This is really good, I said. Thank you. He smiled. High praise from a professional chef. When I finished, he showed me to the guest suite. It wasn't a room. It was an apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, all decorated with taste and luxury that seemed obscene after months of sleeping on concrete. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, Alex said. Shower, rest, sleep as long as you need. We'll talk more in the morning. Alex, I said, stopping him before he left. Thank you for all of this. He shook his head. Marcus, thank you. You gave everything you had to save my daughter. There's no way I can ever fully repay that, but I'm going to try. After he left, I stood in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a ghost. Sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, skin that hadn't seen proper sunlight in months. I turned on the shower, and when the hot water hit my skin, I broke down. All the fear, all the desperation, all the shame of the past months came pouring out. I cried for my lost restaurant, for my lost home, for the man I used to be. But I also cried with relief. For one night at least, I was safe. I was warm. I was clean. I washed my hair 3 times, scrubbed my skin until it was pink, and stood under the hot water until it started to run cold. When I finally got out, I found pajamas laid out on the bed, soft cotton that felt like clouds against my skin. I climbed into a bed with sheets that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month, and I slept. I slept harder and deeper than I had in half a year. No sounds of traffic overhead, no cold seeping through thin blankets, no fear of being robbed or attacked in the night. Just deep, dreamless, healing sleep. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. I checked the clock on the nightstand and was shocked to see it was 2:30 in the afternoon. I had slept for almost 12 hours. There was a knock on the door. Mr. Webb, came Mrs. Chen's voice. Are you awake? Yes, I called out. Come in. She entered carrying a tray with coffee, orange juice, and pastries. Mr. Richardson asked me to let you sleep as long as you needed. He's in his office, but wanted me to tell you he'd like to speak with you when you're ready. There's also fresh clothes in your size in the closet. After she left, I dressed in clothes that actually fit, expensive casual wear that felt foreign after months in the same 3 outfits. When I looked in the mirror now, I looked almost human again, almost like the person I used to be. I found Alex in his office, a massive room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a desk that probably cost more than a car. He stood when I entered. Marcus, I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months. Thank you. Please, sit. There's something I need to discuss with you. I sat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk, and he came around to sit in the other one, creating a sense of equality rather than hierarchy. I've been up since dawn, he began, thinking about what you did for Emma, thinking about your story, and I've made some decisions. Alex, you don't owe me anything beyond what you've already given. Please, Let me finish, he said. When Emma's mother died 2 years ago, I was lost. I threw myself into work because I didn't know how to be both a father and a CEO. Emma became quiet, withdrawn. She was grieving, and I was too consumed by my own grief to help her properly. Last night was the first time in 2 years that I saw real light in her eyes. She couldn't stop talking about you this morning, about how you made her feel safe, about the stories you told, about how you spent your last money to help her even though you had nothing. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Marcus, you gave me back my daughter. Not just physically, but emotionally. She's been walking around this big, empty house like a ghost, and now she's alive again. That's not something money can repay, but I want to try anyway. I don't understand, I said, though part of me was beginning to. I want to offer you a job. Not just any job. I want to invest in rebuilding your restaurant. I want to be your partner in creating something even better than what you had before. And I want to offer you a place here, in our home, while we get everything established. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. You want to invest in my restaurant? I want to do more than invest. Richardson Industries has a corporate campus with 3,000 employees. We have a cafeteria that serves terrible food. I want to replace it with something special, a full-service restaurant that my employees can enjoy, but that's also open to the public. I'll provide the capital, the space, complete creative control to you. In return, I ask for 30% partnership in the business. The rest is yours. The numbers he was talking about were staggering. This wasn't just a chance to rebuild, this was a chance to create something bigger than I had ever imagined. Why? I asked. Why are you doing this? Because Emma is right. You're a hero. Not just for saving her, but for maintaining your humanity when the world tried to strip it away. You had nothing, and you still chose kindness. That's the kind of person I want in my life. That's the kind of person I want my daughter to know. He pulled out a folder from his desk. I took the liberty of having my lawyers draw up a preliminary agreement. Obviously, you should have your own attorney review it, and I'll pay for that. But the basics are simple. $2 million in startup capital, a 5-year lease on the space at our corporate campus with an option to buy, 70-30 partnership split with you retaining creative and operational control, and a salary of $150,000 per year for you as executive chef and general manager. I looked at the papers, the words swimming before my eyes. $2 million, a salary that would change my life, a chance to cook again. There's one more thing, Alex said quietly. Emma asked me this morning if you could stay here. Not as an employee, not as a guest, but as family. We have more than enough room, and she needs someone like you in her life. Someone who understands loss but chooses kindness anyway. I'm not asking you to replace her mother. No one could ever do that. But I'm asking if you'd consider being part of our family while we build this restaurant together. And maybe, if it works out, even after. I thought about the bridge I had been sleeping under just 24 hours ago. I thought about the $1.50 in my pocket, all I had left in the world. I thought about Raymond at the shelter telling me never to lose hope. I thought about my father saying that cooking was about making people feel cared for. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say yes, Alex replied. Say you'll let us help you the way you helped us. I looked at this man who had everything, offering to share it with someone who had nothing. I looked at the contract that represented a second chance I never thought I'd get. And I thought about Emma, that brave little girl who had been lost and scared, but who trusted me to keep her safe. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll say yes. Alex smiled, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his face. Good, then let's get started. I want you to meet with the architects next week about the restaurant space. But first, I think we need to go shopping for some proper clothes for you, and maybe a haircut. Emma has some opinions about your hair. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. She told me this morning that I look like a mountain man, Her words, exactly. Over the next weeks, my life transformed in ways I still couldn't fully believe. Alex was true to his word about everything. He introduced me to his architects, and together we designed a restaurant that was everything the Harvest Table had been and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden where we would grow our own herbs, an open kitchen where diners could watch the magic happen, a private dining room for special events. We called it Second Harvest. I hired Sarah as my general manager before we even broke ground. When I called her with the offer, she cried. "Marcus, I thought you were gone. I went to the shelters looking for you, but no one knew where you were." "I'm back," I told her, "and I need my right hand if we're going to do this properly." We also hired Tommy and Luis, my line cooks from before. We brought in new talent too, young chefs eager to learn and create. But it wasn't just about the restaurant. Living with Alex and Emma changed me in ways I hadn't expected. Emma and I developed our own routines. I taught her to cook simple things, scrambled eggs and pancakes and pasta. She taught me about the books she loved and the games she played. Sometimes when she had nightmares about the night she got lost, she would knock on my door and I would sit with her until she felt safe again. "Marcus," she asked me one night, "are you going to leave when your restaurant opens?" "I'll have my own place by then," I said gently. "But I'm not going anywhere. I'll still see you all the time." "Promise?" "Promise." Alex and I had become close friends. On Sunday mornings, we would cook breakfast together while Emma slept in. He told me about his late wife, about the guilt he felt for not being there enough before she died. I told him about my father, about the dreams I had given up on. We were two men who had lost everything in different ways, finding a new kind of family in the aftermath. 6 months after that rainy night, Second Harvest opened. The response was overwhelming. Food critics came from across the country. The reservation list was months long. But the best part was watching Richardson Industries employees discover that they had access to something truly special. I would walk through the dining room during lunch service and see people's faces light up when they tasted the food. My father had been right. Cooking was about making people feel cared for. 3 months after opening, we were profitable. 6 months after that, Alex and I were discussing opening a second location. But more important than any business success was what happened one Sunday morning, 9 months after Emma found me. Or I found her. We were making pancakes, Emma insisting on flipping them herself while making a mess of the kitchen, when she looked up at me with serious eyes. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think my mommy sent me to find me that night?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know, Emma, but I do know that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to exactly where we're supposed to be. I lost everything in that tornado. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone. But if I hadn't lost everything, I wouldn't have been on that street corner that night. I wouldn't have found you. And I wouldn't be here now, making pancakes with my favorite person in the world." She smiled and hugged me, getting pancake batter on my shirt. "You're my favorite person too. You and Daddy." Alex walked in at that moment, saw us covered in batter and laughing, and just shook his head with a smile. "What am I going to do with you two?" "Love us?" Emma suggested. "Always," he replied. As I stood in that kitchen, in this house that had become home, with these people who had become family, I thought about that moment under the bridge when I had wanted to give up. I thought about the choice to help Emma despite having nothing. I thought about how the universe has a strange way of balancing things out, sometimes when you least expect it. I had spent my last $10 on a lost girl in the rain. In return, I had gained everything. Not just the restaurant or the money or the success, but something far more valuable. Purpose, family, love, the knowledge that even when you have nothing, you still have the choice to be kind. And sometimes, that kindness comes back to you in ways you never could have imagined. I learned that losing everything doesn't mean your story is over. Sometimes it means your real story is just beginning. And I learned that home isn't a place or a building or even a restaurant. Home is wherever you find people who see you, really see you, and choose to love you anyway. That rainy night, when I found Emma shivering and scared, I had thought I was saving her. But the truth is, we saved each other. She gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing left, and I gave her what she needed most, someone who showed her that kindness still exists in the world, even in the darkest storms. Follow your story until the end, I had been told at the beginning. And now I understand what that means. Your story isn't over until you decide it's over. And mine, or mine, was just beginning.